So guys, today we are talking about the restoration of the monarchy after the end of Cromwell's Commonwealth and the early Hanoverians, that is, the first kings belonging to the dynasty of the Hanoverians, the Hanover. Charles, the first son, had spent his exile in France. Charles I was the king that had been sentenced to death and beheaded during the Civil War, and so before the Commonwealth Republic, and his son had been sent in exile in France. At the end of the Commonwealth experience, he was invited back to England by Parliament, and this is the so-called period of restoration, that is, the restoration of the monarchy as after the only republic in England ever. And he was an admirer of the Sun King, Louis XIV, or Louis XIV, Luigi XIV, and he had French tastes because he had been grown up in France. His court was devoted for this reason to pleasure, on the example of the French court. Theatres were restored, racecourses and taverns reopened, and fashion and gossip replaced religious debate at court. London was struck by a bubonic plague in 1665 that killed more than 100,000 people, and the following year, in 1666, there was the Great Fire, il Grande Incendio di Londra, that destroyed most of the city of London. Puritans that saw Charles II's court as corrupted and morally questionable, interpreted these two catastrophes as God's punishment for the king's immorality. During this period, the landowners, I proprietari terrieri, resumed their leadership of society, while the middle classes had dominated during the period of the Commonwealth Republic. And the newly elected Parliament, the so-called Cavalier Parliament, met for the first time in 1661. During this period, three important acts were passed. The first was the Corporation Act that excluded dissenters from public offices. Dissenters is the same as Puritans. The Act of Uniformity that imposed the use of the Book Common Prayer, that was the official book of prayers for the Anglicans, and the Test Act that required all public employees to conform to the Church of England, that again was the Anglican Church. So there was no religious toleration to the other religions, such as the Catholic and the Puritan. In 1662, Charles II started to patronize the Royal Society. The Royal Society was an association of scientists and intellectuals whose motto was nothing by words, that is, a direct challenge to the dependence on written authorities. That is, it became the center of the development of the new philosophy and science, and was based on the experimental method introduced by Galilei and Kepler, basing studies on the observation of natural phenomena, and so never taking for granted what was established by the authorities. Everything had to be demonstrated through experience. Charles II's brother, James II, came to the throne in 1685. we are still talking about the dynasty of the Stuart, don't forget. He had converted to Catholicism in 1666 because his second wife was Catholic, but his attempt to place Catholics in the positions of authority led to a conflict with Parliament. In 1688, his second wife, the Catholic Mary of Modena, gave birth to a son, but he already had two daughters, Mary and Anne, from the first wife that was Anglican. So the first two daughters, his first two daughters were Anglican, while his third child, that was son, was Catholic. Fearing a Catholic succession and a possible civil war, the Whigs and the Tories negotiated with William of Orange, husband of James's older and Protestant daughter Mary, to inviting him to become the following king, inviting him at court. And so William of Orange was the husband of Mary, that, as I have told you, was the first of the two daughters that he had from the first wife, and were Protestant, were Anglican. William of Orange landed with an army in Devon in 1688, and James II was forced to flee abroad. William of Orange and his wife Mary became joint monarchs, as William III and Mary II in 1689. So a revolution had taken place, as the monarch James II had been replaced by another king, chosen by the Parliament, not by divine right, because don't forget that the Stuarts were persuaded that the king was such by divine right. It was this revolution was called glorious because it was bloodless, because it was peaceful. So peacefully, king was replaced by the Parliament with another one. The reign of William III and Mary II was a time of economic progress for England. London became the financial capital of the world. The Bill of Rights was passed in 1689 that, on the example of the Magna Carta of 1215, established that it was impossible for the king to levy taxes, raise an army, or suspend laws without the consent of the Parliament. So it was a great example of democracy and of limitation of the powers of the king. A Triennial Act asserted that Parliament should last for 3 years. Mary died in 1694, and her sister Anne succeeded William in 1702. Anne was a popular queen, was an Anglican queen. During this period, in 1707, with the Act of Union, there was the birth of the United Kingdom of Great Britain. Ireland remained a separate kingdom with its own parliament, but subordinate to Westminster in London, and a Protestant government, again under the British control. After Queen Anne's death in 1714, her cousin George I came to the throne, but he was the Duke of Hanover. So this was the beginning. He was the first king of the Hanover dynasty. He spoke little English and spent most of his time in Germany. And for this reason, to govern, he relied on a cabinet of government, a council of top ministers led by the prime minister. This is the first example of government, of cabinet of government as we conceive it today. That is, there are a group of ministers with the prime minister. The first Prime Minister was the Whig Sir Robert Walpole, and as for the difference between the Whigs and the Tories, we have to say that the political scene was dominated by these two important parties. The Whigs, that were the descendants of the parliamentarians of the Commonwealth period, they supported the wealthy and commercial classes, that were the middle classes, and of course tried to act a policy that was in favor of the middle classes. They fought for the commercial development, they were for a vigorous foreign policy, they were for religious toleration. The Tories, that were the descendants of the royalists of the period of the Civil War, supported the church, were supported by the Church of England and the landowners, and supported the church and the landowners in turn, and fought for the divine right of the king. So the Tories were on the side of the king, the Whigs were on the side of the middle classes. Sir Robert Walpole, that was a Whig, so he was on the side of the middle class, acted an anti-war government that was the longest in the English history. He opposed military expenses, promoted trade, of course, as it was obvious for a Whig government that supported and was supported by the middle classes, by the new commercial, by the new trading social classes. Managed to reduce land taxes, was accused, unfortunately, of corruption by his opponents. And another important fact is that in this period he was assigned a house that is 10 Downing Street, that is still the house nowadays of the British Prime Minister. George II came to the throne in 1727. He supported the war of the Austrian succession. During his reign, the Catholic James Stuart's grandson, Charles Edward Stuart, known as Bonnie Prince Charlie, claimed the right to the throne of England, and raised the Jacobite rebellion in Scotland in 1745, supported by France, but failed. William Pitt became a Whig Prime Minister in 1756. Britain's foreign policy was guided by mercantilism and aimed to maintain a favorable balance of power in Europe. In 1756, war broke out, the 7 Years' War, aiming at spreading the British border in the world. The great era of British imperialism had started, but the climax of the British colonialism and of the British Empire would be reached in the 19th century. The new middle class was looking for new lands abroad to seek its own economical interests, so this was the reasons why they looked for other countries, other lands to colonize all over the world. So the conflict, the 7 Years' War, so the conflict between Britain and Prussia on one side, and an alliance of France and Austria on the other side. And by 1760, the British controlled Montreal and most of Canada, and the British East India Company had set up posts in Calcutta, Bombay and Madras. Okay, that's all for today. Bye.